welcome back to Breaking Down Better Call Saul. Now this one is really interesting because for the very small amount of people who are going to watch this, as it comes out on the day that it's released, this very video right here in the series, it'll be the third one I've published and made live on YouTube. It'll be the fourth one I've filmed, and it'll be the sixth one chronologically. The reason I'm doing this is that I haven't finished my reviews for seasons 3, 4, and 5. And literally as I record this video, the 8th episode of season 6, the first episode of part 2 of season 6, just aired in America. And I'm keeping off. I saw something on Twitter and I'm like, is that, oh, did I get spoiled something? And I'm like, well, if that's a spoiler, that's really interesting. Holy shit. So I'm in a bit of a weird spot right now where I'm just like, I don't want to read any spoilers. I want to go in fresh tomorrow because it comes out on Netflix the following day. In the rest of the world, here in the UK, I'll have to wait an agonizing day, afternoon, and evening until Connie's available to watch it with me. And then I might do a live reaction or something. And I'll try and do a review for every episode of this last season 6B run. But I wanted to make this video, which is my thoughts on the first half of season 6, the first 7 episodes of the final season, just so I could give you my fresh thoughts without knowing what happens in episode 8. Because I wouldn't want this to be coloured by whatever happens in episode 8. I've heard people say, see it as soon as possible without being spoiled. So I feel like something big happens, maybe multiple big things happen, I don't know. But it's very exciting stuff. It literally feels like Christmas Eve to me right now. Because it's been a nice gap. Like, you know, Breaking Bad, the final season 5, they split it into two halves, but it was like a year-long wait or something ridiculous between episode 5-8 and 5-9. There were 16 episodes in total. Yeah, so I think it was eight on either side. But this has been like, 6 weeks, 7-8 weeks, something like that. So it's been manageable. And for me, perfect, because I comfortably revisited the first 5 seasons of the show. But now, I mean, I reached the end of season 5, and then I just rolled through again and watched season 601 again. And that's when it started to feel like I was kind of the well was running a bit dry. Like you watch almost watching too much of the show now. So I stepped back and I didn't watch the next 6 episodes because, you know, I'd seen them recently enough. Now, am I going to remember all the details in this video? Probably not. But I'm so glad that I did watch at least season 601 again, the episode 601 again of season 6, because it really benefits from having watched season 5 and have it literally run directly into season 6. Because episode 10 of season 5 and episode 1 of season 6, it's a continuum. It flows as a lot of the final episodes into the kind of premiere episodes run from season to season. But this time, for me especially, because when me and Connie first started watching season 6, I think we watched some 5-minute YouTube catch-up video to remind ourselves what happened in season 5. I was like, oh yeah, that's right, yeah, the Bagman episode and the money in the desert and everything. But what it didn't really clue us in on, at least me personally, was, and it's a big part of this first half of season 6, is why are Jimmy and Kim going after Howard so hard? Like, I know the past transgressions and stuff, and that Jimmy feels like Howard killed his brother, but it felt like that was kind of done with. And I was just like, why is Kim so up for taking Howard down? Because it can't just be about the Sandpiper settlement. Anyway, before I get into it, full disclosure, obviously there are spoilers for the first 7 episodes of season 6, and anything else, of course. And who's going to watch this video? Anyway, but, you know, it is what it is. I want to kind of have everything talked about in this series. I'm really enjoying doing these, even though they're proving to be very long videos. I love the show, and I've loved it coming back, and I've loved going back and rewatching everything. Now, as I said, it's like a perfect continuum, and it's really interesting because you have a 3-year gap, I think, between filming at the very least, in terms of, you know, the end of season 5, beginning of season 6. And I listened to an interview on the Better Call Saul Insider podcast with one of the women who works with the mission, maybe even the head of kind of makeup and stuff on the show. And she talks about how when Jimmy was out in the desert in Bagman, he had the t-shirt around his head. So like the very tip of his forehead is like still white, and the rest of his face is sunburned. And like 3 years later, they needed to match that for the beginning of season 6. I didn't even really notice the first time around that he had a sunburn or that he had the line, but like that attention to detail is what makes this show so great. So it directly picks up with, well, actually no, the first thing we see in season 6 is Saul's mansion. Now, when I first saw this, I was like, is this Lalo's? Like, well, then I thought, well, no, because we've seen his kind of estate at the end of season 5, and it's a much more quaint kind of family house in a lot of ways, quite big, but, you know, not this extravagant mansion with a gold toilet and all this stuff. I don't know why it took me so long to click, but it was, oh, it's Saul's mansion. We're in, like, post-Breaking Bad territory. But it opens with that shot of the ties falling down in slow motion, like super kind of high frame rate, gorgeous slow motion, and then the black and white fades away into color. And how they did this was actually they just had black and white ties. It was all completely in camera, no visual effects or kind of color correction in post. Like they just had ties that would gradually become more colorful, and they just dropped them all down in sequence. And it's a beautiful opening to this kind of flash forward, I suppose, where you see the Saul mansion being kind of stripped down and people, and it's quite a long sequence. When I revisited it the second time, it gives you that time to kind of see all his, like, there's little kind of Easter eggs here and there. The biggest, of course, being when the van's being loaded outside the house, the topper, the bottle top from the, I forget what liquor it is. It's kind of the trophy that Kim has kept throughout all these years, which was when Jimmy and Kim, I think it might be the first time we see them in the show scam someone. It's the stock trader, right, at the at the hotel bar, and they kind of got him to pay for everything. I'm pretty sure that's what it was, because there was a couple of times they did. I think that's the one. So again, watching season 6, 2 months ago, I was like, what's the significance of this little bottle top thing? And I'd kind of forgotten what the cork thing was. And I think you see that same brand and cork in Breaking Bad. I think it might even be the brand and the bottle that Gus gives to Don Eladio, I think. I might be a little bit wrong there, but if I am, I might kind of throw in a Luke was wrong, I don't know. Or Luke was right. But either way, I'll put on screen somewhere if I was right about that connection. Because there's all these little details in the show that are really fun to spot and to know that are there, I suppose. But, so that's the opening. You kind of get the Saul mansion being taken down. I initially thought that might have been the house that Jimmy and Kim go to look at the open house in season 4 or 5. But it isn't. I actually went back on Netflix and it was a different outside of the house. So, one of the things about the fallout from season 5 is obviously that Lalo was supposed to be assassinated. Is assassination like directly linked to like a political figure or a celebrity? I'm not entirely sure, but he was meant to be killed, to be murdered, and he survived. Obviously, that very memorable ending scene of him walking, towards and past the camera, and the footsteps like thunder and lightning. You can feel the rage emanating from Lalo, and so Nacho is on the run. And season 6 picks up and he's literally on the run. He's out in the wilderness. He just keeps going north. He gets a phone call from Tyrus. And here's an interesting thing. I forget who the writer was. I'll put the tweet on screen. You'll see who the writer is. So I won't call them out by name. But I tweeted at this writer because when we watched this first episode, Nacho is on the run. He gets a phone call from Tyrus and says, keep heading north. We'll be in touch. Take the battery out of your phone, then put it back in after a certain period of time. And Nacho ends up going to this motel. And then he gets another call from Tyrus and gives him more instructions to lay low for a while. Then Nacho calls Mike, and Mike just ignores it. He's with his granddaughter. And we found this really confusing because he just talked to Mike on the phone. Now, when we first watched this, like the first day that it came out on Netflix, it was like been on Netflix for maybe 12 hours or something. The subtitles said, in brackets, Mike, as in Mike was speaking to Nacho on the phone. And I'm like, that doesn't sound like Jonathan Banks. And I'm just like, oh my God, has something happened to Jonathan Banks? Like maybe I know that he filmed the season and stuff and it was completed, but I hadn't heard anything. But maybe like he wasn't available to do the voice for the phone call. Maybe like maybe he's got like a bad sore throat, or he's ill. I don't know. And then we listened back again. We're like, no, that's not Jonathan Banks. It sounds like someone trying to do a Jonathan Banks impression. And then we're back to the beginning of the episode. I was like, no, it's not. And it says Mike in the subtitles. So I tweeted at this writer asking about it, and he clarified, no, it's always Tyrus on the phone. Literally within an hour of me receiving that tweet back from the writer, which was very cool, just to clarify more than anything, I checked it again on Netflix, and it then said Tyrus. It's almost like they knew, and they saw me mention it. Obviously, that is not the case whatsoever. I'm sure it was just a glitch that had already been brought up elsewhere, and it was just serendipitous that it coincided with me asking about it on Twitter. Anyway, that's a whole aside that isn't really relevant to the show, but you feel Nacho kind of the threads are pulling apart now, and it's almost like he's been living on borrowed time for a while, and unfortunately, obviously, I thought maybe Nacho would last till the end of the season, and I really thought he was going to die, obviously, but I didn't think it would be as soon as it was. But going back to it now, you see that this is really this guy who's, he's on borrowed time. And as he gets to that motel, it's just like, and there's so many conflicting forces because Gus kind of wants him dead. Again, I forget the exact particulars, but Balsa, he isn't aware that Nacho is working for Gus to find information out on Lalo. Lalo and Balsa and Gus and Eladio, there's a lot of moving parts there. But basically, like in the second episode, we have, I believe the second episode. Yeah, so Mike and Tyrus and Victor, I think Victor's there. They show up at Nacho's place, and Mike gets rid of the girls who are kind of like doped up and, just staying in Nacho's fancy apartment. Mike kind of shoos them away. They break into Nacho's safe. They bring in an exact model, replace all the money again, and it's like, what's going on here? And then later on you see Balsa turn up, and he goes into the safe and he finds out the information where Nacho is and Nacho's fake Canadian ID, but Mike pockets the father's one, which is very interesting. And you get and Mike, Mike wants to protect Nacho, but he's kind of hands are tied. He doesn't really have the stroke. He tries, like, God bless Mike, he really fucking tries to kind of to get Nacho out, as I will have talked about in previous videos in season, I think 4 and 5, where Mike is really pushing for Gus to pull the strings on Nacho, and kind of, he's done a lot of, he's done his time basically, but Gus is just like, nah, and Mike is, Mike, he goes up against Gus, but there's only so much he can do, right? So yeah, the whole Nacho stuff is kind of very sad. I kind of liken Nacho to Jesse Pinkman. He's this character who does these bad things. He's involved with bad people, but you can see that he's fallen astray, and you can tell there's a good person in there, but it's just through circumstance. And it's more interesting than Jesse in a way, because Jesse, like, he got into drugs, and his parents kind of disowned him. You can see why he slipped into doing the things that he does. Whereas Nacho, Ignacio Varga, his father has a very reputable business, and his father wanted his son to kind of take over and to kind of be there. And I don't know, we don't really know the full story of why Nacho got in with Tuco and the Salamancas, but he did. But it feels like it's from maybe season 2 or 3 that he's been consistently trying to get out, and the conflict with his father and wanted his father to be left out of things, and Hector kind of putting pressure on his neck and on his father's, there's a very intense storyline as it's been rolling out. But now Nacho's he's reached the end of the line, and he's been involved in something that it's hard to come back from. And Mike is saying, like, there's a scene with Mike and Gus and Tyrus, and Tyrus leaves, and Gus is like, okay, what do you want to say? And Mike's like, I think that kid's, he's done a lot from what you've asked of him and stuff, and I think he deserves your respect. And Gus is like, he has it. Is there anything else? And Mike's just, Mike doesn't agree with what they're going to do. which is setting him up to get him killed by the Salamancas. So the twins get sent after Nacho in the second episode, I believe it is. And this is where the big shootout at the motel happens, which is a fantastic kind of action set piece. And the twins, I've really enjoyed seeing them in Better Call Saul. They were okay in Breaking Bad from memory. I haven't got to the twins yet in my rewatch of Breaking Bad this year, but it always it leaves a kind of a bit of a smear on Breaking Bad for me, is the scene where one of the twins falls out of the bed without his legs and he's like crawling like a Terminator. It's just my friend in work thinks it's a badass scene, but at the time I was like, ugh. Very cartoony, and I didn't quite like it. I mean, the shootout with Hank is incredible, one of the best scenes ever. But I've enjoyed seeing them in Better Call Saul. They've been used perfectly, I think. I don't think, is there even any line of dialogue? I think there is when they kind of rescue Nacho and get him, but they kind of save his life when he's out in the desert. Anyway, so I've really enjoyed the twins, and this kind of shootout at the motel was very, very thrilling. Elsewhere in episode 1, we have the Lalo Fallout. Obviously, he survived. And I think, I'm not sure if he was kind of hurt. I'm not sure if he's even putting that on. He might have been. I'm not entirely sure. I have a memory of him limping as he comes up to this house. And there's a woman there, Sylvia, I believe. Or Sylvie, maybe. It jumped out to me because my mother's name is Sylvia. And Matteo, I think, is the guy's name. So this, and I didn't really... This was actually a criticism I have. Now that I know what it is, and having rewatched the episode, it works a lot better. But I do think they can be a bit obscure for their own good, the writers. And they say in the podcast, like, the audience is really smart. They're smarter than we give them credit for. They don't need everything to be explained. And I agree, but this was a bit too far for me, where the guy comes in. These people clearly work for Lalo or have some kind of connection with him. And he comes in, and Matteo comes in, he's got a big beard, he's like, wow, ZZ Top. And you gotta love Tony Dalton's performance, where he just he dances that line of being so threatening and villainous and then just funny at the same time. It's a really nice contrast to Gus, I think, in terms of villains in this world of both shows. And he says to, he never really explicitly says, hey, shave your beard off, but it's kind of expected of him. And he said, hey, keep the mustache and the soul patch, it'll look good. So he shaves off the beard. And then we see the twins turning up at Lalo's house, and they find a charred body, and they kind of lay the jacket over there and leave a card. And I assumed that, okay, so they've seen one of the burned bodies from the kind of attack from the end of season 5, and they've assumed that it's Lalo. Turns out this Matteo character is literally a double for Lalo. This is a contingency plan that he has, where if he ever needed it, there was a guy there who kind of has a similar build, physique, and so on and so forth. And there's even a line when the wife says, his teeth are doing so much better now. They used to bother him through the night, but your dentist did a great job. So Lalo has clearly even offered to fix this guy's teeth, but he's had the dentist give him a set of Lalo's teeth, or one's very similar. So then when Lalo picked up this half of the scissors and goes over to see the guy having a shave, obviously it was implied that he killed him, but I didn't make the connection that he killed this guy, dragged him back to his house, burned him, charred his corpse, and then left him there as a kind of a misdirect. That was, when I heard, I was like, oh my God. But when I first watched it, we didn't quite get that connection, so that's maybe, I think, a little bit of a valid criticism, because it was a bit too obscure. Now, Jimmy and Kim, they're really rattled in the last few episodes of season 5 after the desert incident, but they've kind of realized that, okay, the heat's off now, it's all good, and they've kind of, no, I wasn't really going for that joke or anything, and they decide that they're going to go through this plan to kind of ruin Howard's professional reputation. Now again, this is the one thing that I just didn't like. Why is Kim so insistent on this? Now that I've rewatched season 5, I see the whole story where, Howard was trying to give Jimmy a job at HHM, and Jimmy finally fires back at him and says, "You killed my brother and you want me to come work for you," and all this stuff. And he really goes to town on Howard and has been, even like throwing bowling balls at his like car and stuff. And but it felt like it had been kind of settled. But then he comes to Kim in the last episode, I believe, of season 5, and says, like, "I think you should know that Jimmy's been doing these terrible things." And she's like, "That's it?" And she says to Jimmy, like, it's all about him. He's so obsessed with himself. She's like, we need to do something. And she comes up with these ridiculous kind of like horrible things. But then later on in bed, she's like, "No, I mean, it would be a lot, but we could do it. And then she's like, she does the thing at the end, and Jimmy like lights up, and like, "Oh my God, it's like my perfect woman," and she's now into the stuff that I do, and then there's that kind of, "Oh no." She's kind of becoming me. Like, what have I done? That's the sense that I get from that. And so in the beginning of season 6, when she's like, "So I've been thinking about our first move against Howard," and he's like, "Oh, we're still going ahead with that, huh?" And she's like, "Are we not?" And he's like, "Well, well, let's hear what you got, But you can tell that he's a little bit hesitant, but she is, that's the thing, they're such a bad influence on each other. They really are. And that, to me, is really the brilliance of the whole show. Obviously the way that the characters are influencing each other, whether it be like Mike and Hector, or Gus and Lalo, and obviously Kim and Jimmy, and then Chuck and Jimmy, Howard and Jimmy, Howard and Chuck. There's so many great kind of things going on there. Mike and Nacho, I would say. But the core of this story for me, as it runs through the entire 6 seasons, is really Jimmy and Kim, which wasn't their plan when they first started, which is another great thing of how open they are to letting this story kind of tell itself a little bit, but really reading the room and how great Kim and Jimmy are together on screen, but also the chemistry that Bob Odenkirk and Ray Seahorn have together. And that kind of is the beating dark heart of the show, is how those two have continued to fuse together in a way that is really dangerous for both of them. And that's really where it all comes to a head to in the 7th episode of season 6. But I just, I find it so fascinating. I'm just glad now that I remember why she wants to go after Howard. Because she feels like Howard is just this pompous dick and he needs to be taken down a peg or two. And Jimmy's like, well, there's a way to do it that doesn't completely ruin him and stuff. And, we can kind of, and they plant these seeds. The whole thing with Jimmy at the country club where he plants the cocaine and in Howard's locker, and then Cliff Main sees it, and obviously Howard and Cliff Main are working together on the Sandpiper settlement, which is also another thing that they're trying to force, because once that thing gets settled up, and if they can ruin Howard's reputation enough that Cliff Main kind of says, okay, let's just settle the Sandpiper thing now before our kind of deal gets any worse, because Howard's kind of reputation is very much tied in with that, and HHM and Davison Maine and Schweikert and Coakley, a lot of moving parts, but it makes sense in that, if Howard was to get kind of publicly and professionally humiliated, then the Sandpiper thing would be affected, and they would have to just settle as soon as possible, which would mean Jimmy would get his money sooner, which would mean the old people in the Sandpiper, kind of facilities would get their kind of just money sooner too, which is a good thing. But that's the thing that Jimmy keeps coming to, is like, well, this is for the greater good of these people, but it isn't really. It is mainly for Jimmy and Kim about ruining Howard, and they get off on that. And literally later on in the season, they get off on it, like physically, sexually. They get off on like literally they fuck to the sounds of Howard Hamlin melting down professionally. I mean, that's pretty fucking twisted, and weird as well, I think. But anyway, that's neither. Well, I say it's neither here nor there. It is actually, it is here and it is there and it's everywhere. In this first 7 episodes of the season, it really is the Jimmy and Kim go after Howard storyline that just explodes with Howard Hamlin's brain matter all over their apartment, unfortunately. So yeah, so there's that, and there's all these little things and schemes that they're running, and it keeps kind of building and building and building the coke, and then we got to see the Kettlemans again. They were kind of involved slightly in kind of a little play, and that's one thing with their plan, is the little tiny things that they're peppering in here and there, and like at one point Kim's like, maybe we're being too subtle, and Jimmy's like, no, this is just perfect. I will say, but then it kind of makes sense because when the country club thing happens and Jimmy makes this big show and dance, it's like, well, surely Howard would then find out that Jimmy had just been there when the coke bag falls down, which is a little bit of a flaw in the plan. But, you know, as the whole scheme plays out, we find out that it is kind of the idea that Howard, and in fact, actually, I'd say the whole thing rests on Howard catching the idea that it's Jimmy, because that's going to really set him off and make him look completely unhinged at the right moment at Omaha Beach, right? Which I thought was a very twisted kind of part of their scheme, that when they called the kind of the boardroom Omaha Beach, and they literally sit outside it the night before with, like, I think they're toasting with champagne or something ridiculous like that. Anyway, we'll get to the Howard kind of conclusion. And I didn't give you the episode titles, which I've done in the previous video, so just for housekeeping. Episode 1 of Season 6A is called Wine and Roses, and there's kind of a theme here where it's one thing and another. Episode 2, Carrot and Stick. Episode 3, Rock and Hard Place. Episode 4, Hit and Run. Episode 5, Black and Blue. Episode 6, Axe and Grind. And Episode 7, Plan and Execution. So in Episode 3, we kind of get the big Nacho conclusion. He narrowly escapes the twins and has to hide in that oil tanker. And finally, really, decides to make a kind of a bargain with Gus, and he kind of ends up at a gas station and makes a call, and basically they kind of tell you that Nacho's going to die in this episode. Like, they don't really explicitly say it, but the way that he talks on the phone is basically like, you bring me in and I'll do it. I'll give my life up for this, as long as you keep my father safe. Like, if my father's protected, I'll come in and do whatever you want me to do to make, and it's speaking to Gus, to kind of cover your ass with the whole Lalo thing. Because they know that, you know, Balsa knows that Nacho was there to set up Lalo, and so, you know, is that a Gus move? And if it's a Gus move, then everything falls apart. So Gus really needs that play to kind of, he needs Nacho to kind of tell the others and Balsa and Hector that, you know, this wasn't my doing, right? So they bring him in, and Mike wants to be the one to rough up Nacho. Gives Nev a little drink beforehand and everything. It's all very manly, but, you know, even to the end, Mike kind of wants to be there for the kid. And the plan is for them to kind of bring Nacho out in front of Hector and Balsa and basically just have Nacho run off. And then one of Gus's men, I think Victor, will shoot him. That's the plan. That's what they agree on. But Nacho kind of goes into business for himself there. And Gus is stood there kind of like, you know, Nacho's got Gus's balls in his hand at this point in time. It's a great moment where you're like, holy shit, like he's going to go out, he's going to take some names. And they kind of bring it up to Nacho. They're like, okay, so, you know, who told you to betray Lalo? And he's like, looks over at Gus and he's like, what, you think it was the chicken man? Oh, and he's like, nah, like, and he kind of like, you know, kind of denigrates Gus and kind of, you know, just like, nah, like, not Gus, you know, not the chicken man. And he, you know, he makes up the story that he's supposed to make up, but then he has a shard of glass in his hand and he breaks his bindings loose. He fucking stabs Balsa, pulls his gun out, and you're like, oh my god, what's going on here? And I realized in that moment, he's going to shoot himself. And I thought, this is Nacho taking ownership of his life in that final moment. And I hasten to use the term going out like a man, but, you know, it's that kind of taking things... It makes me think of the Walter White quote. Live life on your own terms. Who's in charge? Me. That's how I live my life. In that last moment, Nacho, he had a job to do, you know, to keep his father safe. 'Cause that's the thing, he could have exposed Gus, but that would have killed his father, so he was never going to do that. He just made Gus sweat a little bit first, you know, which is brilliant. So again, he took his life, he kind of, you know, again, lived life on his own terms in that last moment, and kind of made Gus sweat a little bit, but did what he had to do, kind of absolved Gus of kind of the responsibility and the blame, and the accusation that Gus might have been involved in this. Clears Gus's name, but, stabs Balser in the leg, gets the gun out, and then just is like, if I'm going to die here and now, then I'm doing it. Shoots himself in the head. And as his body's lying there and we see his head, there's a slight smile on his face. It's fucking beautiful. Like, I love Nacho. I love Michael Mando, who plays him. Did a great job. And how could I even forget? Well, I didn't, obviously, because I just brought it up, or I'm about to bring it up. But, there's no way I could forget the final, the main kind of, like, the stake of the main course of this whole scene is Nacho looking over at Hector Salamanca and saying, like, it was me, motherfucker. I was the one who switched your pills. I'm the one who put you in that wheelchair, you sick fuck. Oh, and he's just like, every time, you piss yourself in that retirement home, I want you to know that it was me. Like, I'm paraphrasing, but oh my God. And he got into Hector's skin so much after he's killed himself. It's kind of become a meme now, but like they pick up Hector in the wheelchair and they pull him over, and Hector's got the gun like this, and he just shoots Nacho's body, just boom, boom, boom. Like, dude, he just pulled your pants down in front of everyone. It was beautiful. Like, I couldn't imagine if you told me beforehand that Nacho's death would be so satisfying. I mean, it's sad that he died, but I think it was just... And the phone call to his father as well. This is where the writing on the show just really sings for me. When he calls his dad, and that he wants to tell him he loves him, but he doesn't say it. And it's just in the words between the words, And his performance in that moment is beautiful, and it's just like... He just wants to hear his dad's voice again, one last time, and... it's no real consolation. It's not going to give his dad any peace or anything, but it's something. And he got to at least speak to his dad one last time, and that was really important to him. But I think, again, another important thing for him was to go out on his own terms, and he went into business for himself, and it kind of paid off. Like, that was pretty much the best outcome of him dying in that moment. And we had Mike off in the distance as well with the sniper, and to make sure everything went okay. But yeah, what a great moment, and sad to see. See, I was really surprised, like a couple of maybe like less than 48 hours after this episode came out, I actually was spoiled that Nacho died. I was kind of annoyed about that, but I didn't know how it was going to go down, so I was really like thrilled when I saw it all play out and everything in real time. But on like the official channels of like Better Call Saul, like Facebook and Twitter, they're like, rest in peace Nacho and stuff. I'm like, dude, calm down. Like, what? Just guys, tone it down a notch. You really don't need to be like saying rest in peace Nacho like 2 fucking days after the show came out. Like, give people some time. Anyway, that's a whole other thing. That's a whole other thing. But yeah, talking about the going back to the Jimmy Sandpiper settlement, how the old people are only getting older, so the sooner they get their settlement, they can enjoy it before they die. Like, that's the brass tacks of it. So when Jimmy is enlisting Huel to help him out with one of his Howard schemes, he kind of gets in the car with... I love Huel. I've really grown to love him through Better Call Saul, and I'm looking forward to seeing him pop up again in Breaking Bad. I can't really remember much about him in Breaking Bad beyond the lying down on the big pile of money and the fact that he's left sat there at the end of Breaking Bad and you never find out what happens to him. Poor Huel. But he says to Jimmy, he's like, can I ask you something? And he says something personal. Jimmy's like, sure, what is it? Like, why do you do all this? Like, you're a lawyer, you make on the level decent money. Why do you do all this? And Jimmy's like, oh, this isn't just another scheme. This is all, you need to see the bigger picture. This is going to help people, down the line. And Huel's like, if you say so, and that's almost like the little devil on Jimmy's shoulder. And it's almost like Jimmy's having the conversation with himself. Like, Jimmy's like, no, this is a good thing we're doing this to Howard. It's to help these people. And then the other side of him's like, if you say so, Jimmy, and Huel's kind of like the voice of reason almost. But that was a nice scene that I enjoyed. And in episode 3, Rock and Hard Place, we see Jimmy dress up as Howard, steal his car while Howard's in therapy, which is a very kind of stressful, like almost throwback to the silent era kind of slapstick comedy. It felt like a Laurel and Hardy sketch when he's trying to pull the pull the kind of the parking thing out of the ground and stick it down, and then like, who puts a cone there? Like it's just this comedy of errors. And he takes the car, and we see another Breaking Bad cameo in Wendy, who looks like almost exactly the same, which makes me think that like they must have done a great makeup job in Breaking Bad, and she now just is aged to that point. But the prostitute from Breaking Bad, was that line Hank says? Something like, do you want Wendy to give you a windy or something like that? And so she gets brought back. Jimmy's driving with her as Howard while Cliff Main is having a meeting with Kim, and then Jimmy kicks her out of the car. And Cliff can clearly see at a distance it's Howard's car, and he can kind of see the back of his head. And even though it's so far in the distance, Jimmy's still got like the orange face and everything. It's so funny. And I'm glad that as things are getting really serious towards, the second half of this season, we got some fun and levity in those moments, even though retrospectively everything that's working towards this Howard plot is really dark, because you know where it ends now and it's not pretty. Oh no, that was actually in episode 4, I think. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so the bit with Wendy and Jimmy dressing up as Howard was in episode 4. Not that it matters. Well, maybe it does. I'm not sure, because in my notes I have Jimmy as Howard in episode 3, and then episode 4 it's Wendy appears. So maybe it just kind of, I'm not sure actually. I'm not sure the timeline on that. That bothers me for some reason, even though it's such a small, tiny detail, but it is what it is. I think maybe I might have just listed it in my episode 4 notes because I didn't have enough room in my episode 3 notes. That might be the problem. It doesn't really matter. I'm just talking about this as if this is one big chunk of story. Anyway, at this point, Jimmy is he needs a new office because the nail salon's just not working out. He's getting so much traffic because word is getting out that he defended Lalo, and that it wasn't was it Luis Guzman or something like that, his kind of code name, and I think it was even I think it was the end of season 5 when he's, or maybe it was, I forget, because these bleed over now that I'm watching them like in such close proximity with each other. But there's that moment in the courthouse where Jimmy is talking to some of the lawyers there, and they're asking him like, you know something about this Guzman, like, and he wasn't who he said he was. We think it's someone else. And Jimmy's like, hey, I didn't even know Lalo or something. And they're like, Lalo? And he's like, yeah, just someone else. I have so many clients. So he slipped up there. Slipping Jimmy slipped up. And I'll probably have talked about that, I'm assuming, if it's in season 5 in the previous video. But it's getting out now about Lalo. And so this is kind of putting Jimmy in a tricky spot where Saul is now being looked at in a negative light professionally. But from like all the criminals who want like they want their kind of their kind of criminal defense, they're now looking at Saul like, this is the guy who got Lalo Salamanca out of jail. So now Jimmy like needs to find an office, and that's where we see the office from Breaking Bad, and they bring in Francesca again, and it's just a toilet in the middle of this just kind of rundown kind of office space. And there's a really funny story in the Insider podcast where the toilet came from Vince Gilligan. I think he was looking for a flat somewhere. I forget where it was, or an apartment, as they would say in America, years ago. And this is Vince Gilligan, the creator of Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. And he was looking through this apartment. A guy was giving him like the tour, and there's just a toilet like unplumbed, just like in the middle of the apartment, and the guy who was giving the tour just acted as if it wasn't even there. And it's a very funny story. You should hear more about it on the Insider podcast, which I highly recommend if you're a fan of the show. Lots of great behind the scenes information, and generally a pretty fun and enjoyable conversation between a lot of people who work on the show, writers, directors, actors in some cases. And I think almost every episode has the creators, Vince Gilligan and Peter Gould. Now, episode 4 was directed by Ray Seahorn. Yes. So they've done this before. I think Bryan Cranston directed an episode of Breaking Bad in the second season, I believe. And also later on in season 6, Giancarlo Esposito Gus directed one of the episodes. But Ray Seahorn directed the 4th episode, which opens with this really cool sequence of Gus coming home and going down into his basement and then through a tunnel and coming out in another house on the other side of the street where they're monitoring his house from the other side of the street, which is showing you the paranoia that Gus has because he believes that Lalo is still alive. And I forget. Oh yes, so I forget the setting, like what the scene was, how it happened. But it's a meeting, I guess, probably between Balsa and Hector and Gus, and they say Lalo's dead, and Hector, who knows better, he looks over at Gus, and Gus kind of he susses it. Hector's kind of looking at him like he ain't dead. You know? So Gus figures out that, or at least assumes that I think Lalo might still be out there, and Lalo also calls up Hector and kind of like goes through like the alphabet to find out like what Hector wants because Lalo's about to come back across the border, but then he decides that the one way he can kind of nail Gus is to get proof of what Gus has been doing, and so he gets an idea, and he leaves. And we don't know where he's gone to until I think an episode or two later when we find him in Germany. This was a big surprise to me, and I was like, oh yeah, the German storyline. I guess this makes a lot of sense. And we see Lalo turn up in this bar, and there's a woman there, German. And I'm like, oh my god, it's Werner's wife. And Lalo's there, charming Werner's wife and stuff. And it's like, what the hell is going on? And then they go back, and she's like, I'm sorry, not tonight, And then it's kind of like a sweet little, you always feel like they are getting some kind of connection. But he waits until she leaves in the morning. Lalo goes in to try and find some kind of proof, and he finds this lucite sculpture which Werner's men had made for him when they'd had the funeral. And this somehow leads him down the line. He goes and finds Casper out in the woods as one of the men on the construction crew who are building the meth super lab. A very tense sequence and kind of a little bit violent. And he kind of gets information from Casper. And that's when, later on, I think this is actually in the 7th episode, we see Lalo appear, and he's in Albuquerque, and he goes into the sewers, and he comes out, and he's literally in the storm drain across the road from the laundry where Gus's lab is, and it's like, holy shit, it's all funneling into this massive conclusion now, holy shit. But I've loved all the Lalo stuff. I just think Tony Dalton's fantastic, and such a great character. It's just a joy to watch him, even when you feel dread in those moments where dread is applicable to the scene. But he's a lot of fun too, which makes him a devilishly entertaining character, I think. In episode 5, Black and Blue, we see Cliff confront Howard over all the things that have been happening, and Howard very, very quickly, it all snaps into place for Howard. It's Jimmy. And that's when Jimmy gets a call and shows up at this kind of sports building, I guess, and it's Howard in a boxing ring, and he's like, let's just punch it out, man. You've obviously got something wrong. You have a problem with me. There's something that you need to get out your system. You've been pulling all this shit on me. Let's just get in the ring and punch it out. Jimmy's like, nah, spare me. But he can't, it's like the main kind of not callback, but like the recurring kind of character moment in this show. Well, when I think about it, I'm trying to think like if anyone does it besides Jimmy and Kim, but it's when they kind of have a conversation with someone, they leave, and as they're walking away, they stop, and you just feel like, oh no, they're going back. They're not satisfied. And it's that moment where Jimmy's like, all right, let's get the fucking gloves on, and they have their boxing match, and Howard beats the fuck out of Jimmy, and he's like, right, hopefully that's it now, that's settled. And Jimmy's like, why did I let myself get into that, And it's kind of become so, personal. And throughout the season, we get like hints of this big board that they've made up of the plan against Howard, and I think there's some name for the plan. I forget what it is now, but you never really see all the pieces and kind of know where, which is the fun part of the fun. And then there's this whole plot where Jimmy has his pictures taken, giving money or receiving money, I think, from this, I think it's a judge who's coming in from out of town to be a mediator for the Sandpiper meeting between Howard Hamlin, Cliff Main and his people, obviously the HHM people, and then Schweikert and Coakley, I think, and then I think it's Irene. I'm not sure if it's Irene, but a woman from Sandpiper is there too, and Howard's kind of helping her, and it almost seems a little bit insincere the way he's kind of fluffing her up and stuff. But and actually, I think he says, "No, no, stay in the wheelchair," and that's the thing with Howard. Like he does have these manipulative moments to him. He's not this like. Well, it's tricky because some people just hate Howard and think he's a dick because Jimmy hates Howard and thinks he's a dick. I really like Howard, but I also don't think he's like a kind of picture of morality either. I think there's certain things that Howard has done that haven't been the nicest, but I generally and genuinely feel like Howard was a good person, which is why the seventh episode stinged so hard. But in the episode that Ray Seahorn, I'm jumping all over the place. I apologize for jumping around so much. In the fourth episode that Ray Seahorn directed, I think a few times in the early episodes, someone's kind of following Kim, and in episode 4, she kind of just goes up to me, she's like, "What are you doing? Why are you following me?" Like typical Kim, like she's just at balls of steel, completely fearless. And then Mike kind of shows up and says, "We're following you because we're looking at anyone who Lalo might contact, and we know that you've had contact with him." And she's like, "So you think he's alive?" And Mike kind of confirmed. There's a nice scene between Kim and Mike in this little restaurant. And nice to know that she directed it as well. And she finds out that Lalo might be alive, but she never tells this to Jimmy. And that's the interesting thing, like the reason they got married. So they would tell each other everything, and they'd be protected by kind of the sanctity of marriage, with the law binding kind of confidentiality, I guess, between a married couple, spouses. But it's just like, wow. Like this, the fact that she withheld that information from Jimmy is mind blowing. Like, why did she? Is that going to be addressed? I don't know, and it must be, given the fact that he turns up at the end of episode 7. But it's like, that's a big thing that she withheld. But then Jimmy's withheld a lot from her too, and that's just the fascinating ebb and flow of their relationship and their dynamic together on screen. And it's just, yeah. So. Where do we go from this? So we had the Kim meeting Mike. I'm just kind of reading through some of my notes here to kind of bring us home here. We're kind of getting through so the guy who was going to be the mediator at the Sandpiper meeting, he's some judge, I believe, and Jimmy has someone dressed up as him, as an actor kind of impersonating him. They take kind of covert pictures, and Howard has hired a private investigator to follow Jimmy to see what he's up to, and they've kind of like they've worked it around so that Howard gets these pictures of Jimmy with an actor playing this judge, and so now Howard's like, oh my god, the judge who's here to be the mediator for the Sandpiper settlement, he is being paid off by Jimmy, and so it's just like there's so many moving parts, like the vet. The criminal vet, like he gives Jimmy this kind of substance that's gonna make the eyes go funny, and so Jimmy has this stuff kind of like the substance is built into the photographs, so that when Howard looks at the surveillance pictures of Jimmy, it comes on his fingers, and so that means that it's gonna kind of enter his system or whatever when he rubs his face, and his eyes are gonna look bloodshot, or not bloodshot, but like his pupils are going to change. It's going to look like he's on coke, like there's so many details to this master plan that it's honestly incredible. But again, I'm going to be really intrigued to rewatch episode 7, knowing what happens at the end, because it's so satisfying to see the plan just fall like dominoes so neatly into place, down to like Jimmy getting Francesca to call up, I forget the young woman who works at Davis and Maine, to get the call-in number for the Sandpiper settlement so that they can call in with the right code to listen in to Howard melting down. Like it's just like, it's down to the nth kind of degree and detail. And so it all kind of funnels into that 7th episode. But I'm just seeing if there's anything. There's the black book that the vet has. I think there's even a card there for the cleaner, which is Robert Forster's character. So, and I think you even see that little black book with all the criminal contacts in it in the opening scene, the cold open of episode 1, where they're going through Saul's mansion and you see the book. But yeah, so Lalo, we see him with Casper. We see him with the with the laundry in Albuquerque, and he films a little video to kind of say, hey, this is what Gus is up to. And then Lalo calls Hector to to clue him in and kind of catch him up to speed with everything. And he just hears the click. Like, Lalo is so perceptive. He just hears the click on the phone and he realizes Gus has got this wired. And he freaks out. He starts smashing it. And you rarely see Lalo lose control like that, because he's realized that someone's just that one step ahead of him, and he hates that. So he smashes his little chair that he's been sitting on in the sewers. He smashes it up. And then he realizes what he's going to do. He calls back again. I think he calls back. I'm not sure. Yeah, I think he hangs up, then calls back again. And he says, okay, Hector, I'm moving on Gus tonight. So this is a big misdirect. And I thought, watching the episode for the first time, okay, so he knows that Gus is listening in, or will hear this recording. So he's saying, I'm going after Gus tonight, so that Gus kind of, gets everyone to kind of protect him in his house. So then Lalo can go into the laundry. And you even see all the men start to leave the laundry. So that's what I thought. And that was a beautiful bit of misdirection from the writers there, because now in my head I'm putting Lalo in the laundry to try and find the meth lab. Earlier on in the season, we also saw Gus kind of hiding a gun in the meth lab as well, which, I mean, hey, it's like the Wayne's World joke, right? I can't help but wonder if that's going to come into play later on. So Gus is hiding the gun. And I just have to say one thing, like, you really, like, Gus's kind of story throughout this first half of season 6, it's really subtle, but, like, these little things where, like, he's kind of, look, it's just little details where you can tell that he's really bothered by the fact that Lalo's out there and he's not in control of the situation. He's got Mike on the lookout, and he's kind of got all this, like, he's got too much security everywhere. But he's just like, like the scene when he's in the bathroom, just kind of like with a toothbrush, just furiously cleaning the edges of the bath. Like, Gus is, he's a control freak, and he ain't in control here. So it's really interesting to see him kind of not unravel, but, like, it's all kind of just bubbling under his skin. You can tell it's, like, really getting to him. And so Lalo kind of, he sends off the misdirect. The Howard plan kind of goes flawlessly. And the way it all kind of, it's so beautifully done, where, like, Howard is like, this man. Well, that's another thing. So the judge, who Jimmy gets an actor to play, kind of handing off the money so that Howard will suspect. Jimmy then sees the judge in town, and he has a cast because he broke his arm. He calls up Kim, who's off driving to this, like, actual professional business meeting that's very important. And he's like, the guy's got a cast. Like, we have to abort the plan because they're going to see this picture and realize that he has a broken arm, so that's not actually him, it's an impersonator. And Kim's like, I'm coming back. And she turns her car around and just drives straight back, just abandons, everything with her professional career, because the Howard thing is more important to her. And you just think now, looking back, just that act of Kim turning her car around on that highway killed Howard Hamlin. And you can go, I mean, there's so many ways you can kind of say, well, this killed Howard, or this did that. But, it really is a heartbreaking moment in retrospect, where it's like, oh my God, if she just kept on driving and they aborted the plan, they could have, I mean, they'd had their fun, that could have been enough. But they weren't satisfied. They needed the climax, basically. So, and quite literally, they needed the climax, because when it all unravels, and Howard is saying, like, because obviously they go and they reshoot the pictures of Jimmy and this guy now in a cast, and they get that done in record time, and they get the photos switched. Howard finds it, gets the stuff on his fingers, gets into the kind of the boardroom, and he's looking at this guy, the judge. I think he's a judge. Again, some of these details might be a little bit incorrect. Don't judge me too harshly for that, because there's a lot to remember, and, like, some 6 odd hours of television that I watched in weekly installments over the past few months. So Howard is looking over this judge, and he's just like, I'd like to bring something up. And you're like, oh no, he's gonna go there. And he says, like, I've seen pictures of you with Jimmy, money was exchanged, and this is not an impartial mediator. And he's like, go get the pictures from my office. And at this point in time, the pictures have been switched back. And they bring the pictures, and it's just Jimmy with someone else, and they're looking at Howard like, what's going on? And Howard's like, no, that's not it. It's go check again, and we're getting flashbacks to chicanery with Chuck and his meltdown, and again he's like shouting about like Jimmy did this, like you don't believe me, but I'm telling you, Jimmy did this, and then Cliff's like Howard, and he turns and his eyes, the pupils are starting to go, like, oh my god, it couldn't have gone more perfect, and then Jimmy and Kim, they're listening to this on the phone, but they're sat there kind of like listening to a sports game, but then once it all starts kicking off, we cut back and the phone is kind of left almost kind of, well, obviously they're listening to it, but it's like the phone isn't really, they're not kind of huddled around it now. They're in the background getting it on, and it's like, oh my god. And Howard is like, that's when, Schweikart's like, okay, you're going to settle for the Sandpiper thing now, and every day that you don't, we're going to drop our offer by like $1 million. So the Sandpiper thing gets settled, obviously, and then the final scene, which only took me about an hour to get to. The final scene is Kimmy and Jim in their apartment just celebrating their huge success, and there's a knock at the door, and the candle on the table flickers, and in comes Howard Hamlin, and his ties loose, his shirt's kind of ruffled, and what an amazing, and Patrick Fabian, I really liked his performance as Howard. It was cool also to see him with his wife and to see the strained relationship there, because you do kind of feel like Howard has it all figured out, and because of the appearance, the keeping up of his appearance, and the perfect pinstripe suit, and the kind of everything that kind of goes into his image. Obviously, the thing with Chuck really rattled him and stuff, but you still get the sense that things are good. But, as he says, and as we saw, my marriage is like going to hell. Like, my career's been suffering, like all this stuff, like I'm getting depression, I can't sleep. Like he starts bearing his soul in front of Kim and Jimmy, and he's just like, I can't, why would you do this? And then he gets really kind of mean, but he's mean in a way where he is absolutely correct. And he's like, what was it? Was it, putting you in doc review, Kim? Like, what, all these little things that, you think that I've done to you. And he's like talking about all the things that he's done for them. And it's just an amazing, out. And, at first, Jimmy and Kim are like, I don't know what you're talking about, Howard. Like, come on, just leave. Like, and they're kind of, they're playing into their lie until Howard has just, deconstructed them to a T. To the point where he's just like, you're perfect for each other. And I'm paraphrasing, but he said, I think he says you're soulless. And they're like, you need to leave. And he's like, don't even try to deny. No, he says, of course you're denying it because you have to. And then Jimmy's like, you'll be okay, which is kind of him admitting to it in a kind of, cowardly way, I think. You'll bounce back. And Howard's like, you're right, I will bounce back. And he just gives them such a piece of his mind, and it makes you see them differently, I think. For me, it was like, he's really right here. Like, they went way too far. But, it's good that they got a talking to. And then the candle flickers again. Now, just to go back to what I said earlier, in my mind, and I think that's what they intended, seeing Lalo in the sewer, the storm drain, watching Gus's men leave the laundry, and say, to Hector, I'm going after Gus tonight. So they're going straight to Gus's house to protect him. Now Lalo is free to go into the laundry and poke around, right? That's where my brain has placed Lalo in the laundry at this point in time. And I thought maybe this scene will end with Howard leaving, and then we'll end the episode with Lalo finding the lab with his camera, like, hey, like Hank, or whatever, like, look, Balsa, I found the lab. And no. In comes Lalo behind Howard. There's a really funny thread on Reddit saying come up with the best worst writing for Better Call Saul, write really bad lines for that wouldn't fit in the show in a way. And one example was in this scene when Howard is stood there and Lalo appears behind him. The bad line was Howard going, he's behind me, isn't he? Which would have been terrible. But also when Lalo's on the phone to Hector and he realizes that Gus is kind of tapping it, a bad line would be Lalo smashing up the chair and going, damn it, Gus figured out a way to wire the thing, and now I have to go after the lawyer. Because you see Lalo look up and he sees a cockroach going along the drain, and that's when he calls back and makes the misdirect. Because when he sees a cockroach, he sees Saul Goodman, and he said that in season 5. I think it was La Cucaracha or something, which is really bad if I got that wrong. Obviously, in the language that it came from, but Mexican, Spanish, it's he basically says to Kim, like, Saul will be fine, when he's in the desert, and she's worried about him having kind of died during the $7 million kind of situation. He's like, he's like a cockroach. He'll survive anything. So when he sees the cockroach in the storm drain, he's like, I'm going after the lawyer. And it's like, it's there if you're thinking about it. And I didn't catch the reference. So for me, Lalo turning up at the end was a complete. I mean, I've spoken to friends who are like, well, I could see it coming. Good for you. I'm glad I didn't, because it was like a breath. Like, oh my shit. And Lalo comes in, and how's it? What who's this? And Lalo's like, oh, I'll just kind of speak to my lawyers. And they're like, Howard, you need to leave. This, they're really trying to get Howard to leave, but Howard is just so confused. Like, what's going on here? And then Lalo takes out the gun and starts twisting on the silencer on his pistol. Earlier on in this 7th episode, Plan and Execution, just before the Sandpiper settlement is about to. Kind of the meeting is about to happen in the boardroom at HHM. Howard is there with a young intern, or kind of a lowly member of the HHM staff, and he's preparing drinks for the meeting. And there's a big portrait of Chuck, and Howard is like, he was a great man and everything and all this stuff, and it's kind of nice to see Chuck, but one of the cans of sparkling water or whatever it was, soda, falls. The intern kind of like fumbles, and he's like, well, that's going to be shaken up now, right? So he picks it up. Here's what you do. He puts it on the table and he spins it in this kind of direction. And he's like, this is a way to kind of neutralize the spark. And, twisting motion to kind of suppress an explosion. And there's Lalo twisting on the silencer. I told that to Connie, and she's like, oh my God, that's evil. And she's like, I've got chills. And then, Lalo's just like, I just want to talk. And Howard's like, I think I should leave. Boom. For a moment, I almost thought Howard was going to get out of it, but how could he? And an amazing moment, a horrible moment, a horrific moment, because Howard gets shot, and it's kind of a callback to Chuck. The head hits the table and he's dead, and the kind of howl, the scream from Kim, and the screaming of Jimmy. I mean, you saw Jimmy go through something really heavy in season 5 with the shootout in the desert, and he's fucked up from it. He's got PTSD from that. But this is different. This isn't some random nameless kind of cartel member or gang member who's being shot in front of him. This is someone who Jimmy has worked with and known for many, many years. And yeah, Jimmy doesn't like him, but I think Jimmy knows deep down that Howard is a good person. I think that Jimmy knows deep down that while he blames Howard for his brother's death, he knows deep down that isn't really the total reason for Chuck killing himself, So, Jimmy isn't a complete idiot. I'm sure that there's still something within him that knows that Howard is a fairly innocent person in all of this. And Kim, too. Even if they dislike him, I don't think they hate him, and I don't think they would want him to die. And seeing everything that they've done up until that point literally explode in front of them in the form of Howard Hamlin's brain matter being plastered all over the apartment wall, it horrifies them, and they're just screaming. And I think there was an excerpt of the script posted on Twitter, and it just said that they were stunned in silence. But it works so much better. And that would have worked fine, but it works so much better when they're just like screaming, like, oh my, like, no, like, you feel it in your chest. It feels like, at least for Kim, it feels like someone who has never seen someone die before get murdered right in front of them. And the absolute abject horror of that unfolding. Amazing. Like, just, and then Lalo's like, so let's talk, whatever, he says something to that effect, and that's the end of the episode. And that the flickering of the candle, like it's like a life about to be extinguished, And poor Howard, like, I just feel so bad. Like, that was the whole reason this series of videos exists, because I couldn't wait for 6 or 7 weeks with that image of Howard dying in my head for that long. I needed to go back to the beginning and kind of wash that away somehow. So that's what I did, and I'm just watching the whole thing. But plan and execution, literally, like, it's a devilish title, because they planned it, it was executed, and then Howard. But I'm so glad at least that Howard got to give them a piece of his mind, and to do the right thing, and to really tell them what he thought of them. So now moving forward, what the hell happens next? I have no idea. I have no idea. I mean, they've got to clear up the body. What is Lalo going to do with them? Will he kill Kim? Probably not. That would be a bit too... this just doesn't feel like it would be right. Obviously, Jimmy survives. Is Lalo going to be, like, controlling them now? And what are they going to do with Howard again? I have no idea. But for Jimmy and Kim, I think this is the breaking point. Either this kind of cements them together for life to a point where they write it into the show that she was behind the scenes the whole time with Saul in Breaking Bad, and that obviously they get split apart. I mean, they could do that. They could show a scene of the end of Breaking Bad where Saul says to Kim, like, I need to go. Like, hopefully we'll be able to link up, but maybe that's the main reason he's so depressed. I don't know. As Jean in Nebraska, but it's very viable that she could be kind of Mrs. Saul Goodman. And there's even hints of that where she's like, in season 6, she's like saying, justice for you or whatever. Like, she's kind of planting the seeds and kind of making Saul more like Saul. And that's the thing. I don't feel like Saul Goodman would exist without Kim Wexler. I really don't. I think that, like, them teaming up has just made them both so much better at what they do and so much worse because of it. Because Jimmy has these kind of leanings, and Kim, who's just so brilliant. Again, like he says, when we team up, we're unstoppable, right? And when he gets that taste of having pulled off a scheme so perfectly, they just keep chasing that, I think. And maybe that's, the Howard thing was just an excuse. They just love getting off on it now. And Howard was the perfect mark for it, unfortunately. No way they wanted him dead, but, like, everything that happened led to such a sticky end, literally. The cleanup's not going to be fun for them. But I don't know. So again, either this just fuses them together, and she's the Mrs. Saul Goodman behind the scenes, because you look at the mansion in the beginning of the season, and it's like, that's not Jimmy. But, when she says to Jimmy, like, well, does Saul Goodman drive that kind of car? I think Saul Goodman would drive something really flashy and American. She knows that the image of Saul Goodman is a really important thing for him. Maybe she pushed for the gold toilet and all this stuff. The topper, the topper that she kept, not Jimmy, the topper that she kept fell off the van when they kind of cleared out the Saul Goodman mansion. So did Kim survive all of Breaking Bad? And will we see her again in the Gene timeline? I think we might. I don't think it's as simple as just killing Kim beforehand. And I think killing Kim before Breaking Bad just makes Saul in Breaking Bad... I mean, they've said that the end of this season, the final season of Better Call Saul, will make you see Breaking Bad completely differently. Maybe it is. Maybe she does die. I really don't know. But either that happens, or it's the opposite, and this completely shatters their illusion, shatters their relationship, and there's no going back from that. And it's like she can never look at Jimmy the same way again, because she knows that teaming up with him in that way has ended in someone being murdered, right? And it's, it all just has been piling on. Friend of the cartel, Jimmy first getting involved, kind of against his will with Lalo, and you just think, like, if he hadn't kind of crossed paths with Nacho, and Nacho hadn't been, kind of stuck around, and obviously he wasn't able to get out of the Salamanca business, and so you see all these things where people don't want to do things, but because of the life that they've led up until that point, they're in a situation they can't get out of, and it's all just, again, funnel towards this explosive moment. And I just can't wait to see how Jimmy and Kim deal with this, what it means for their relationship. That's the fascinating thing for me. And poor Howard, it's a shame. I think Howard was actually really a great character, and Patrick Fabian, I think, gave a great performance, and especially in that final scene, the vindication that he had. He felt hurt and torn up, but also fire lit underneath him to finally just give them a piece of his mind. And he was so vindicated in saying that. I was so happy that he managed to say that. And then the the confusion and the kind of panicked fear that was starting to build just as he was shot. Fantastic. So round of applause to Patrick Fabian for a great character. I think a really great character who kind of flies under the radar for a lot of people, I think, but he's been one of the most enjoyable characters to me of the show because I've always been interested in seeing what he does, what he says, and I like to dislike him. I like to like him. Like, people say, like, I love to hate that character. I don't hate him, but I like to dislike him in the appropriate moments. And I like to like him in appropriate moments. And so he's been a very interesting character with a lot of layers to it. So that is it. That was my very long extended thoughts on Season 6, Part 1, Season 6A. And this will probably be the longest episode of the entire series. I was really hoping this would be like a 30-minute kind of roundup, but I had so much to say. Probably more that I missed out on as well, but episode 8 is around the corner. So my next video will be my review and thoughts on episode 8, which is directed by Vince Gilligan, and who knows where it's going from here. My only real prediction at this point in time is that the penultimate episode, at the very least, will be a Breaking Bad episode, because it's written and directed by Vince Gilligan. I just have a feeling that penultimate episode will be like a pure, full-on Breaking Bad episode with Jesse and Walt. We know that Aaron Cranston and Brian Paul, we know they're back. And I was really surprised that they announced that like months ago, but they're like, yeah, and Aaron Paul and Brian Cranston came back. Like, okay. They're usually so secretive about this stuff. So, and recently Brian Cranston said that we filmed our episode secretly. So our episode, like not our appearance, not our cameo, not our scene. So I feel like we're getting a full episode. I mean, I don't know how much there'll be in it, but I have a feeling it'll be a full Breaking Bad timeline episode. That's my theory, the penultimate one. But who knows? It could be that episode 9 is a full... I have no idea. There's 3 different timelines here. There's the current timeline of the show. There's the Gene timeline post Breaking Bad. There's the Breaking Bad timeline that they could visit, and there's any point in time that they could go to there, whether it's like just before Saul meets Walt and Jesse, during the rise of Heisenberg, near the end of Heisenberg's reign. And how's Lalo going to fit into all of this, I feel like I really want to see a Lalo-Gus showdown, whether it's like physically, in the same space or just kind of through different means, in the same way that kind of the Walt and Gus showdown was with, from afar very much, even though it was Hector who took Gus down, it was Walt's kind of doing. There's just, oh man, I feel like a kid on Christmas Eve, because tomorrow I get to see the next part of the story. And it's a special time, like it's the finale to the final 6 episodes of the best show I've ever seen. And so I kind of almost don't want it to be here already, But here we are, and I've loved talking about it so far. And I will try my very best now to do a video per episode moving forward. And I will start to fill in the gaps of season 3, 4, and 5, my thoughts. And by the end of it, we'll have hours and hours of me waffling on about the entire story of Better Call Saul. And then I'll do Breaking Bad. Actually, no, I won't, because that's just too much of an undertaking. And doing these videos has been very costly on my time, because I have little time to make videos anymore. And here I am making these like hour-long epics, like for every season. It's just like, oh my god. Anyway, but I've enjoyed doing it. Hopefully you've enjoyed listening to it. And there's probably no way anyone will watch this before they see episode 8 of Better Call Saul if they're fans. So obviously what's happened before I do, where I'm sat right now in this present moment in time. But obviously, hopefully someone has enjoyed this this large snippet of my thoughts on the first half of season 6 of Better Call Saul. And I'm finding it hard to just say goodbye, because I don't want to say goodbye, because the moment I turn this camera off, it's the beginning of the end, and moving into the final 6 episodes. So exciting. I have so much faith in the team behind this show to stick the landing. And well, I guess I'll talk about it as we move ahead. Maybe like in my review of the penultimate episode, I'll talk about what I want the ending to be, because I have an idea of what I'd like the ending to be, but we'll leave that for future videos, because there's still going to be, I guess, 6 more videos. Maybe 6 more and then a final wrap-up. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. And I'm going to try and film reactions, because I remember I did a reaction video for Ozymandias, which was, what weird luck that was, that the only reaction video I ever made of Breaking Bad was like probably the best episode. And it's fun to kind of go back and see my shocked and kind of emotional reactions. So I will endeavor to set up a camera to see if there's any kind of reactions that might be interesting, but I won't force it or anything. It'll just be, as I see it. It won't be any kind of performative, like, like that's not me, unless it's Star Wars Episode 7, and that's very much me, unfortunately. But yeah, so we'll see how the reactions go, and I'll try and do some, and it'll be spoiler reviews, obviously, and we'll see where we go from there. So thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.